Hello viewers, and welcome to this week's edition of the JCTR Corner, a program brought to you by the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection in conjunction with Loyola TV. On the program today, we just want to look at Zambia's preparedness for the 2021 general elections. And in the studio to help me discuss this particular topic, I am joined by Peter Mwanangombe from the Christian Churches Monitoring Group, also known as CCMG. Mr. Mwanangombe, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me, and good evening, viewers.
Okay, as a way of introduction, what is CCMG and why CCMG?
Right, so CCMG, as you rightly said, is a Christian Churches Monitoring Group. Was established in 2014 with a view of observing, or rather monitoring, the 2015 presidential election. What we do for elections is usually we employ the PVT methodology. That's something obviously we'll talk about as we go on the show.
Okay.
But briefly, in terms of what our objectives are and who are our members, we primarily look at issues of enhancing transparency and credibility in the electoral process. And we do that by monitoring different aspects of the electoral cycle. We are a member organization restricted to 4 faith-based organizations, namely the Council of Churches in Zambia, the Evangelical Fellowship of Zambia, the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection, and the Zambia Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Okay.
So basically that's that about CCMG.
Okay, great. So as a country, Peter, are we on course in terms of the preparations for next year's general elections?
Well, that's a very challenging or difficult question. However, and I can only answer it in different parts. Yes and no. No, in the sense that there's quite a lot that has to be done. And unfortunately, because of COVID-19, a lot of things have been moved and rescheduled. So as you can imagine, I think ECZ was planning to do registration of voters around May. And that has significantly moved now to about 28th October or thereabout. So that means we have very little time in which we can prepare. We also have seen a delayed start to the mobile NRC issuance process. And we've seen a number of extensions. And by implication, it means that other processes will have to wait. So from the electoral management body point of view, there's quite a lot that we need to do. From society's end, I think we are quite happy with what we are doing, and I'll speak very much for CCMG. We've observed a number of elections thus far, and that has given us a taste of what we can see going forward. We've also observed different processes like boundary delimitation and many other processes. And I think very soon we'll be rolling out our civic and voter education campaign. So from civil society perspective and from a CCMG perspective as an organization, we are more than ready. But I think there's a lot to be done from institutions like the Electoral Commission of Zambia and many others that are involved in election observation.
When you say there's a lot that has to be done, what exactly do you mean? What is involved in terms of preparations for the nation to be deemed as adequately prepared? What exactly are we supposed to do for us to know that, okay, yes, this is it, and we are ready for the 2021 general elections?
Okay, so one of the major things that we actually need to prepare for is the voters register. And if you recall, in 2015 to 2016, the register was done in 60 days. There was 60 days for people to register. And it went through a process of verification and things like that. But even then, stakeholders had a problem because the date of elections was now embedded in the Constitution, and that meant that we could not extend any further. So we are almost in the similar situation where by, say, January or somewhere there, we should have had a certified voters roll, or even by May 2021, April, May 2021, we should have had a certified voters roll. But because of the start time, and this is why this has been limited. So in that regard, we think there is quite a lot that the Commission needs to do. Suffice to mention that we already know in terms of how prepared they are to procure ballot papers, which I'm sure you know by now that they've been a contract was awarded to that Dubai company. So I think in that regard they are quite prepared, but there is a lot more than ballot papers. There is procurement of different other electoral materials. There are a number of trainings that are supposed to go on, and God forbid if COVID remains with us up to such a time, then it means that we'll have to restrict certain gatherings and limit the number of people at gatherings to a smaller manageable number.
Okay, great. Well, viewers, you're tuned into the JCTR Corner, and today we're looking at Zambia's preparedness for the 2021 general elections. In the studio, I'm joined by Peter Mwanangombe from the CCMG. So, Peter, what is your comment on the manner in which the issuance of NRCs is being organized and the other voter registration process?
Right. First and foremost, NRC issuance is an exercise that happens on a daily basis at district offices. So anybody that is of age are supposed to go there and obtain their NRC. Actually, the law says that within 30 days or something, it even gives a restriction. Once you turn 16, within a certain period of time, you're supposed to go and apply for your NRC, yeah. But then when there is an election, in an election year, the DNRPC is encouraged to conduct mobile NRC issuance aimed at just trying to capture everybody else that is eligible to vote. So there is a very huge connection between voter registration and NRC issuance because the ECZ will determine the number of eligible voters based on those that are actually supposed to have NRCs. So that's why you see DNRPC and Ministry of Home Affairs launching a drive for mobile NRC issuance. So that process should have started long before now. And the reason for that is that we need to have NRCs before we can register to vote. So you can't have one process running behind the other, as the case was in 2015, 2016 processes. And for voter registration, I think it's like I alluded to earlier on, it should have started in May, so that there is ample time for people to register. There is enough time for people to verify their registration records. There is enough time for ECZ to do the cleanup of the register. There is enough time for CCMG to be allowed to conduct an audit of the voters register to ensure that it's complete, it's accurate, and it's credible. However, it's also important to note that world over there is no perfect voters register, because even after you close registration, you find that there are people that die, for example, and there are people that relocate. And because that has closed, it means that the accuracy of the register is not 100%, because you have people that you expect that are going to vote, but they are not going to vote because they actually do not exist. So, but we try and do an audit to ensure that we try as much as possible to minimize those issues in the register.
Okay, I know that you do monitor elections here and there, and obviously you are part of you followed closely what happened in Malawi. Would you maybe try to comment on that, relating it to the Zambian context?
Specifically, what would you want me to comment about?
Maybe the manner in which everything was handled from the preparation point up to the voting itself. What exactly can we learn from them as a neighboring country?
Okay, well, I think elections are not held in a vacuum, and by a vacuum I mean they work within certain legal framework. So I think Malawi as a jurisdiction has its own legal framework for holding elections. However, they also are supposed to conform to certain regional and international standards. So for example, there is a SADC document that guides how elections are supposed to be held. And if Malawi, was close or met some of the barest minimums, then it means the election in that country was somewhat satisfactory. So what I don't have authority to speak over is in terms of the outcome and how the election were managed. But I think by and large, preparations were there. I think observers were allowed to monitor, except there were few other issues of TPEX, which we all are aware of, which was mainly an issue of results management from the part of the Electoral Commission in Malawi. So in terms of whether there is something that we can learn from there, of course there's a lot that we can learn. One is that as much as possible, the Commission should try to minimize errors. And I think one of the things that they can do is to allow counting to be done at polling stream level. And that is by actually converting the polling streams to polling stations, which I think Zambia is actually trying to adopt now. That way you reduce the number of times you are counting the same votes. And when you are counting votes, one result too many times, you are prone to make mistakes, and those are the typical things that you see. But also it just raises a lot of questions in terms of why can't you count here and announce there? Why do you have to move these things to go and count them elsewhere? So there will be issues of ballot paper stuffing and many other issues. So to reduce that, let's allow for counting at the center, and then results are announced. I'm aware that actually Malawi did a tour before their previous election.
Okay.
They came to Zambia, they came to learn. So I think for me, it's about what is it that we can learn from all these countries, and we pick the best practices.
Okay, talking about the best practices, what exactly can you point out? Are there specific things that you can pick out to say, okay, maybe we should also allow autonomy of, let me say, the police, the way they handled the situation, the people in the judiciary, the executive? Was there any kind of autonomy away from the way we see things? People are saying mostly Zambians are being agencies are being directed by politicians. Is there anything different that Malawi did in these elections?
Well, again, I don't think I can speak with confidence or authority on that, because it's difficult for me as an outsider to determine how much influence the politicians in Malawi had on institutions like the police. Any constitution that will read will tell you that the electoral management body is independent, the police is independent, and all that. So to an extent where these principles are actually upheld within a country, that I think I'm not able to speak for actually on behalf of Malawi, or something that we would have learned from there. But I think one thing that was clear is that citizen participation was quite high, and so people were resolved to actually go out and participate in these processes, regardless of how difficult the situation was out there, if at all police were enforcing the law correctly or not. But I think broadly citizens were resolved. They wanted to express their will, and I think they did that by turning out in numbers and voting for their preferred candidate.
Okay, so as CCMG, I would just like to find out, are you also involved in advocacy work? By this I mean, do you go out and tell the people how exactly they're supposed to do things? Do you encourage them not to shun away from elections and all that?
Yes, so remember I mentioned that very soon we'll roll out our civic and voter education campaign, and basically that is targeted at a number of people, especially in rural communities, to sensitize them about the importance of voting, just to try and, it's a very difficult thing to try and convince somebody to know the connection between their vote and how it relates to their well-being, their vote and how it relates to them having a job and things like that. So it's a very difficult thing, but I think we are trying. We are going to do a lot of advocacy, some on social media, some on TV, some on radio, but we're also going to try and do this at community level. But again, because of the restrictions on the number of people you can organize, I think that has been one of the setbacks that we've encountered. But I think we are still determined to find a way and engage with the communities.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter. So far, so good. I'm loving the flow of everything. For now, let's just go for a short break. We'll continue on the other side. Well, viewers, do join us shortly. We'll be back. See you soon.
As frontliners in the battlefield, we choose to rise above COVID-19. Yes, we choose to fight and to rise above discrimination and not to succumb to fear. We are now alert And together as one, we are ready to raise our strides of hope. Death might be knocking at the front door, but no mountain is too high, no river too wide, no storm too fierce. Our pain will strengthen us. Fear will drive our faith. Tiende pamozi na mtima umozi. Atwende antomwe amoyo omwe. I stayed at work for you. Stay at home for me and be safe. Be that change.
Please do your best to stay at home. If you must leave your home, please remember to mask up. Keep social distancing of at least 1 meter and wash your hands often with soap and running water or any alcohol-based hand sanitizer.
Welcome back to the program, and today we're looking at Zambia's preparedness for next year's general elections. And in the studio, I'm joined by Peter Mwanangombe from CCMG. Mr. Mwanangombe, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Just a quick one, apart from preparations from the ECZ, are we as citizens ready for next year's elections?
Well, I don't know, but I think because elections are held at predetermined intervals, so I think we just have to be ready. But I think that's a good question because there are some citizens that have had elections in their constituencies, in their wards since 2016. So most of them are actually tired. As we speak now, there was a by-election in Chilubi a few months ago, I think in December. There was another by-election within Chilubi again in February, and there is going to be another by-election in Chilubi in October, somewhere there. I'm not too sure of the dates. So you can see how much the people of Chilubi have had to go back to vote. So some of them are still tired, but I think over and above all, a general election is something that is interesting to everyone because then they are voting for their president, they are voting for their members of parliament, they are voting for their councillor, they are voting for the mayor, they are voting for their council chairpersons. So I think the general election comes with its own excitements and that citizens would really love to participate.
Okay, maybe let's talk about our politicians, these political parties and the like. Would you say that they are doing their best to convince their people about the elections that we're about to have next year?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think there are some political parties that have been able to speak to the electorates. There are some that are just, go to TV and say what they are going to do. But I think the fact that there are restrictions in terms of how political parties can organize meetings, how political parties can engage with communities, that limits the extent to which political parties can actually prepare for a general election. So there are times when a political party wants to do community engagements, and then that is, categorized as campaigning, and then the rules that apply for campaigning within a period of time are applied on them. So I think there are a lot of restrictions and limitations that political parties are facing currently in order to make them ready and be able to campaign. But we hope that, and actually as CCMG, we hope that come that time when political parties are supposed to campaign, when it's official campaign period, they are going to be accorded the same opportunity to speak to whoever electorate they feel like, to sell their manifestos and just interact with their communities without them being restricted in the name of maintaining public order.
Okay, let me take you back to the citizens themselves. I know you tackled a bit on this, and just before the break, you were explaining about your advocacy work that you're about to do in terms of preparing for next year's elections. I know there may be someone out there who has never voted and they're watching the show. They don't know what it takes or what it is like to vote for a particular individual, a president, a mayor, or even an MP. So what exactly can you bring out right now in terms of teaching them how well should they be prepared? What is expected of them if they are to go into that room and cast their vote?
Yeah, so I think in Zambia we have what we call voting is voluntary. In some countries voting is mandatory. Therefore, if you've never voted before in certain countries, then you'll be committing an offense. But thank God in Zambia we are not committing an offense by not going to vote. However, the standard is that every citizen has an obligation, and their obligation is to fulfill, is to go out there and participate in all civic activities, and they also have that right. So while they are right, you can choose to not to express it or to express it. I think our encouragement is that if you've never voted before, you have an opportunity now. When ECZ starts the registration process, ensure you acquire a voter's card, and then on election day, go to your nearest polling station where you've registered and vote for your preferred candidates. I think that is the only thing that we can say. The judgment should be, the responsibility should remain with the voter to choose the candidate of their choice, and that because they actually have the freedom to do so, which is obviously expressly guaranteed in the Constitution. So for us, we just tell them to say they are free to go in the booth and choose their leader with whom they feel they will represent them very well. And at the end of the day, be able to hold them accountable for whatever they are not doing or whatever they've done.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter. Now, I would like to find out from you, when we talk about the same preparations, the elections and the like, would you say that as a nation, are we really on course when it comes to the process itself? I know elections are, if I may say, 11 months from now, if I'm not mistaken. Are we really doing what it takes? Is there anything that we need to do more, if at all we're not doing more?
Yeah, so in terms of the activities on election day, I think over and above all those are usually straightforward processes. But I think for us it's the processes before the elections, those that are within the electoral cycle. So remember that in September last year, no, actually in August last year, July, August, ECZ was doing delimitation. So delimitation, they were creating, it involves the creation of constituencies, wards, polling districts, and polling stations. So that process ended. The number of people participated, the number of people did not participate. We have not seen the final report because it has to go before Parliament and things like that. So that is one of the processes that people should participate in. And that is a process that determines how many constituencies are going to be there going forward, how many polling districts are going to be there, how many polling stations are there going to be in 2021. So that's an important process that has to be transparent and inclusive in the way that it's done. Another process that is important is the issuance of NRCs. And I've already touched on that. But then the emphasis to that is that these processes need to be open to the public for them to participate in. Currently, the Ministry of Home Affairs has not allowed anyone to observe this process. And there's a problem in doing that. Why? Because we are not going to trust the outcome of that process. Already you've seen on social media pictures of children holding NRC cards. I was actually coming to that one. So let's now talk about the transparency itself. We've heard allegations that, people in border areas are being given NRCs. We've heard that these processes are being controlled by a named political grouping. So all these allegations are coming out. And if there's no one out there to monitor, it means there is no independent voice to actually confirm or verify some of these allegations. So once people already have problems with such processes, it means that the electoral outcome is going to be questioned. And don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for questioning the electoral outcome, but I think every reasoning person needs to make a connection between these processes, the NRC issuance, voter registration, and finally the way the results are tabulated, because these processes are related. So if you're asking whether there's something that we need to do to ensure that a 2021 is a good election, yes, I think there is need for institutions like Ministry of Home Affairs to be transparent. There is need for the Electoral Commission of Zambia also to, I'm not saying they're not transparent, but also to enhance their transparency, their communication to stakeholders, and their consultation with stakeholders. Secondly, the administration of the Public Order Act becomes a very big issue during campaign period. The police needs to find ways of ensuring that this process is done very, very well. The enforcement of the Electoral Code of Conduct and the Electoral Act, there are a lot of powers that are given to the Commission, but some of them they are not really, enforcing. So we would like to see them, take up some of these challenges and enforce the law as it is provided to them. Freedom of the media, freedom of expression. A number of media institutions have come under threat for closure. Others, their licenses have been revoked for simply expressing themselves or for having an opposing view. Others have been, stormed by cadres, and they've been threatened with closure for simply hosting somebody who's got a dissenting view. So all those issues compounded together form an electoral environment. And if all these things are not addressed today, it means that our election, in as much as the election day will be peaceful, in as much as there won't be anyone violating anything on election day, but we are going to judge. We are going to place our comment, our final comment on the election, on the pre-election process, because we believe that these processes do not exist in isolation. They exist in unison.
Okay, I know it's unfortunate that time is not on our side and we need to wrap up the show. Maybe as we conclude the program, what is your recommendation as CCMG as a way forward in terms of preparing for next year's elections? As you respond to that one, I'd also like to find out from you, of course, what you think of there's this issue of inmates voting, Zambians who are based in other countries, that they'll be allowed to vote in next year's election. So as a monitoring group, how do you look at this particular issue? Well,
so I'll start with the last one. I think the issue of inmates voting is an issue of, it's a judgment that was passed in a very huge case at the Constitutional Court level. And I think that given, it means that the only thing we can do and the only thing the country can do is to prepare and facilitate for how they vote. But I think, again, everything that we do in the electoral process and in any other process, transparency is key. Involvement of stakeholders is paramount. So we hope that at every stage of these processes and trying to find modalities of how inmates could vote, there is need for stakeholders to be involved. There is need for stakeholder consultation. In terms of people in the diaspora voting, I'm not sure ECZ has made any pronouncement on that. Unless they are able to come back and vote from home, I don't see how they are going to vote, especially that we don't have electronic voting. They could vote at embassies like other countries do, but I'm not sure if ECZ has already made those modalities in place. Having said that, our recommendations as CCMG are that key stakeholders in the electoral process, like the Electoral Commission of Zambia, need to be transparent. They need to engage with stakeholders and at every stage of the process. The police needs to, enforce the law without fear or favor. Political parties also need to rise above the occasion. I think many of them, it's been business as usual, name calling in campaigns, which leaves electorate with no choice because they really are not getting what they are supposed to hear. So I think to political parties, it would be good to see them speak about the real issues, avoid name calling. I think some of you know of a clip so far on social media where a strange term was used by a significant figure, and so we really hope those are things that we will not see going forward. The other thing that I will speak about is I think the church should not be relegated to doing or to just be there, but I think these are institutions where political leaders, government leaders, politicians can actually tap wisdom from and can rely on for unity as well as dialogue. So I think there is need for all these platforms to be used correctly. And us as monitors, we are going to play our role. We stand ready to observe the elections, and we are going to do what we do best.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter, for that wonderful explanation. And thank you so much for coming to the studios to discuss this particular important subject that we had at hand. To our viewers out there, I would like to say thank you so much for having staying tuned with us. This has been the JCTR Corner with me, Annette Mlenga. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.